Alongside the celebrated Māori leaders and warriors of our history, there exists another group of remarkable men and women. They were visionary and courageous and led Māori through times of massive upheaval in Aotearoa. In this series, we'll journey through the epic stories of the prophets of our people. What were their messages and visions? Did their prophecies come to pass? Do their words still have impact today? Will they guide us tomorrow? Pai Marire was the first Māori religion based on the Bible to have a nationwide impact. It was an attempt to distinguish Māori Christianity from the dogma of missionaries. This religion, with its principles of goodness and peace, was a sanctuary for Māori people who were finding out that war with Pākehā did not bring victory. An enduring symbol to this faith was the flagpole, a link between earth and the new God in heaven. This Māori religion was created by a prophet known as the Windman. Dr Hone's religion would be declared illegal by the settler state, its adherents hunted down and banished. Dr himself would be captured, arrested and imprisoned, dying of tuberculosis soon after his release. Dr's calling as a prophet was only during his final 4 years. The story of his early life and times had prepared him for that role. Dr was born in the 1820s. It was a violent frontier time when hand-to-hand fighting with traditional weapons was replaced by death at a distance. The arrival of ngutu parera, muskets with a firing mechanism that looked like a duck's lips, changed the face of intertribal warfare. The so-called musket wars of the 1820s and 1830s saw the introduction of new technologies and new economics that upscaled old politics to a degree never seen before. The massive warfare was to transform Māori society, but the introduction of new ideas would permanently change the identity of hapu and iwi. Northern rivals Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Whātua led the way, but soon all tribes were trading for muskets. Thousands of Māori died in the subsequent wars, where old scores were settled with the fearsome new weapons. When he was only 10 years old, Dr Hone and his mother were captured by a Waikato raiding party and taken as slaves to Kāwhia. In Kāwhia, the young Dr came under the influence of enlightened missionary John Whiteley. While Dr learned to read and write, the missionary infused the young boy with a love of scripture. The teachings of the newly translated New Testament would have a profound and life-changing effect on the young Dr and throughout the land. After returning to Taranaki, Dr worked for missionaries and continued his biblical studies. He also became a supporter of attempts to stop the continuing loss of Māori land. It was a rapidly changing social and political landscape. New Plymouth began to bulge at the seams with settlers wanting to get their hands on land. This was a contest between settler and Māori over land and sovereignty. From this conflict would come the kingitanga and the aukati.
Ko mōhio a tāwheo ki tēnei āhuatanga, ko mōhio te mahi a te krauna ki a tāua i a Waikato. Ko ki te i ngā āhuatanga o tērā kaumata. Pai ana hei noho, hei whakaruru hau. Hara mai ki roto i te nehe nui, noho ki reira, mā koe tiake. I te mea ko rāhui tia te whenua, kia kore e te hi o ngā Pākehā whakawhiti i te raina me ki te raina aukati. Kia hara mai ki roto i te rohe pōtai.
It's hard to appreciate today just how different the two New Zealands were at the time. We had the Pākehā towns and their surrounds, small recreations of England. And beyond their borders we had the Māori world, unknowable to some, enemy territory to others. Things came to a head in 1862 when the steamer the Lord Wolseley beached at Te Namu, within the Aukati boundary. Te Ua saw this as a tohu, a sign. The sinking of the Lord Wolseley was to be a tohu for Te Ua, a sign of new possibilities. This was confirmed 5 days later by the appearance of the Archangel Gabriel in a vision to Te Ua, promising the end times from the book of Revelations. In this vision, Te Ua was to be God's prophet, lifting the yoke of the Pākehā oppressor and restoring the promised land to Māori. Many considered Te Ua mad, but within 3 months he'd completed the organisation of a distinctive new church. Te Ua wrote his own take on the gospel, Ua Rongopai, the gospel according to Ua. Te Ua named his church Ho-Ho. Prophecies would be conveyed to the faithful by the Spirit of God in the wind. Te Ua Haumene's own spiritual name, Windman, emphasised the powerful imagery of wind. Te Ua developed a symbolism centred on new or tall masts hung with flags. The first of these new was created from the mast of the wrecked Lord Wolseley. His other symbol was the upraised hand. Te Ua told his believers they only had to follow his instructions and they would be bulletproof. They had to say the right prayers and raise their right hand.
The Pope came off the Maria Jane when it was shipwrecked over in the Tauranga coast. I don't know how they would have got it here, but it would have been a major feat to get it over the Kaimais, of course. It actually gave people the opportunity to release a lot of the tension and stress that they had around the times of conflicts, not only the intertribal conflicts, but the turmoil that occurred when the government started coming through and the threat of confiscation of land, all those kind of things. So the po itself allowed the people to be thankful and to practice their spiritual beliefs without any inhibitions.
Ho-ho ceremonies would have been remarkable events. The faithful spoke in tongues while they circled the new, uttering prophecies, while the angels of the wind swirled about on ropes hanging from the mast's yard arm. A frenzy would ensue. In this context of the people facing the encroaching loss of their lands and the likelihood of imminent conflict, the prophet evoked a message of peace and goodness, of Book of Revelation-inspired redemption, and of a better future. However, for Te Ua and his followers, dark clouds were forming on the horizon. Coming events would turn the followers of Pai Marire and their prophet into enemies of the state, to be hunted down, imprisoned, even executed. The story of Te Ua Haumene and Pai Marire is the story of a faith based on goodness and peace. But soon this faith in goodness and peace would come up against the hungry power of colonisation. It would then also become a story of conflict, of violence and of death. By the mid-1860s, Te Ua Haumene's ho-ho religion of peace and goodness had gained a strong following. But with colonisation ramping up, events would turn the prophets and his followers into rebels to be hunted down.
What the prophets were trying to do in that time was to create a new synthesis using this new religion, a mixture of Christian beliefs and Maori traditional customs. The idea was to use this new religion to unify the people, ki te whakakotahi te iwi. And then when they'd succeeded in unification, then they would be able to challenge the power of the state.
Being militant seems to be a hallmark of particularly the followers of prophets. Mostly because I think they take onto themselves the sense of being a kind of a rebellion, kind of an uprising against a dominant power. And so we make that human and fallible choice to become a violent opposition. And I'm not just talking about physical violence, but, you know, intellectual, verbal, even spiritual violence. And, you know, those aspects certainly do exist in the scriptural record of what it means to be a prophet, but they are by far and away the smallest part of what it means to be prophetic. Being prophetic in Scripture is about, in the end, returning us to our greatest life-giving potential, because we are the voice pieces of a great life-giving God.
The spread of Pai Marire was fast and effective, but the events in this church in March 1865 changed everything for Pai Marire, for the prophet Tua, and for much of Marire. Kereopa Tarau was one of Tua Homene's 5 original disciples. He was of Ngāti Rangi Wewehi and had been a member of Kingite forces during the Waikato Wars. During the Waikato War, his wife and 2 daughters had been killed by government forces at a church at Rangiaowhia. His sister was killed the following day during the fighting at Hairene. Kereopa's scars would not heal.
Te tainga tu ngā hoia ka haere at ki roti te pare. Koe pare mo te karakia. Tahuna atu te pare, mate katoa. E tahi o te whānawa Kereopa te rau, e mate ki roti te pare.
Tua sent Kereopa and Pātara Raukatauri to the east coast to spread the word of the new faith. They were under strict instructions to remain peaceful and to leave the Pākehā alone. Kereopa still sought utu for the loss of his family members. He would find it in Opotski. Karl Volkner was a German missionary who began his work in Taranaki. He soon converted to Anglicanism, and as some converts can do, his zealous belief became a form of ignorance. When conflict broke out here in Opotski in the 1860s, he ignored the needs of his flock and instead began spying for Governor George Grey and for the Empire. He would pay for his ignorance with his life. On March the 2nd, Volkner discovered that his Māori congregation had embraced the ho-ho beliefs. The Pai Marire warned Volkner to stay away from the town, but he returned. Volkner was captured, put on trial and hanged from a tree. His body was decapitated and the head used in the subsequent ho-ho service. It is said that Volkner's blood was drunk from this chalice. There were dire consequences for the Whakatohia tribe, with pillage, rape and murder by the colonial forces. Within 2 weeks, they had stripped the countryside of all available food supplies. They kept what they needed and destroyed the rest.
Maoris were citizens of the British Empire. The murder was a civil offence. All that needed to happen was the police to go and arrest Kereopa. But instead, Governor Grey declared martial law because they used the murder as an excuse to get more land for European settlers. The Auckland province by this time was full. They didn't have enough land for the incoming settlers, and so the murder at Opotiki was an excuse to get more land using the 1863 New Zealand Settlements Act.
Hoena te matenga, hoena e te whakatohia te utu. Ko moko tera. Mauri atu ki mautini. Me e tahi atu. Hoena ka mate atu a moko ki reira I roto mautini.
Moko was a whakatohia chief and one of 5 Māori executed on the 17th of May 1866 for their alleged role in the murder of Karl Volkner. The government punished whakatohia further for Volkner's death and confiscated much of the tribe's land.
And so the hanging of our tipuna, of Ngāti Patu's tipuna, moko, was a long-standing grievance in whakatohia. But worse still was the confiscation of 175,000 acres of land by Governor Grey.
The story of Tua and Pai Marire is the story of a faith in peace and goodness. But this faith in peace and goodness came into conflict with the forces of colonisation. It then also became a story of warfare, of violence and of death. But Te Ua's remarkable and influential religious journeys did not end with the retributions in whakatohia. Pai Marire converts had some easy victories over small British-led forces. This gave a powerful impetus to the movement. The ho-ho warriors took decapitated heads of their victims around the countryside to show the power of this new religion. This recruitment drive worked. The number of adherents across the North Island rapidly swelled. By the end of 1865, a news stood in almost every large village, from Taranaki to the Bay of Plenty, and from the north of the Wellington district to the Waikato frontier.
When news came of the Pai Marire, or the ho-ho religion as it was known over here, that it was coming in our direction, and the Reverend Volkner was killed in Opotiki, so that murder was associated with that religion. You might be able to appreciate how Ngāti Porou saw that, and a lot of the word they put out that it was a false religion, that it was a religion that killed people.
Governor George Grey, fresh from his invasion of Waikato, issued a proclamation that condemned the Pai Marire for revolting acts repugnant to all humanity. Across the island, and especially in the East Coast, government forces embarked on a mission to crush the religion. Hundreds of followers were arrested, many taken to exile on the Chatham Islands. To the Pākehā mind and authorities, ho-ho became a popular catch cry for all things evil. This must have been a disaster for Te Ua. Pai Marire was a religion constructed for peace in a time of war, and yet some of his disciples had gone against his instructions and had sought war, not peace. As a consequence, Pai Marire was under attack. A religion that was born with peaceful intent was now profoundly wounded. From Taranaki, the prophet Te Ua and his Pai Marire faith spread out through the heartland of the North Island. This peaceful spiritual belief was now in direct conflict with the Crown. After the murder of Reverend Volkner by Pai Marire zealots, Governor Grey outlawed the religion. Its followers were now rebels to be hunted down. In February 1866, Te Ua Haumene was captured near Opunaki. Governor Grey decided that this prize captive would be kept for himself. Te Ua was brought in shackles and placed under house arrest at Grey's home on Kauau Island. Sir George Grey earned the respect of Māori in his first term as governor for his recognition of the treaty and for learning te reo. In 1862, after a term as governor of Cape Colony in South Africa, he returned for a second term as governor. Wars had broken out in Taranaki, and the Empire wanted a strong man in place. During this new period in office, Grey purchased Kauau Island. Grey lavished large amounts of his wealth on the island's development. He enlarged the mansion house and planted a huge array of exotic trees and shrubs. He introduced a bewildering array of birds and animal species, including monkeys and zebras. He amassed an array of native artifacts. It was a heady mix, a strange cross between the British Museum and Michael Jackson's Neverland. It must have been a strange and terrible thing for Te Ua to be transported and imprisoned in the stately home of the man who had obliterated his religion. A mission that had been gifted to Te Ua as a sacred vision by the angel Gabriel. George Grey was a fascinating man of empire. An intrepid scholar, he had a genuine interest in the places he visited, the people he encountered, and the stories he heard. The taonga here in this most ornate man cave would have had great personal meaning for him. However, this room also displays the darker side of British power. Taonga become artifacts, displays of the casual power, greed and arrogance of the empire. We see a form of imperial plunder from Africa, from Australia, from China, and of course, from Aotearoa. The calculating grey made the greatest display of might by collecting people.
Now, I personally have no time for Governor Grey because I think he was the hitman of British imperialism. He was ruthless, cunning, devious, and what he did was wrong in terms of British law.
Grey was determined to crush the mana of Māori leaders who stood against him. He had insight into the Māori mind and knew that to belittle a leader's mana was to diminish and ultimately destroy them. To divorce a leader from the source of their mana and authority rendered them neutral and irrelevant. Prior to arriving at Kauawetua, Grey had paraded the prophet from Whanganui to Auckland, making the point that the Ho-Ho resistance was defeated.
Well, to him, it's expression of mana, domination. He was giving messages, and that's the message, is that, okay, military invasion, power, I've got the biggest guns, I've got all this power. So, and that tactic of intimidation and domination was carried right through from Grey's time, well into the next century.
In June 1866, Tuaho Mene was allowed to leave Kauau and return to Taranaki. He was already suffering the effects of tuberculosis. His health rapidly declined, and in October 1866, he died at Oyo. Governor Grey had done his best to crush the Pai Marire religion. It looked as if prophetic resistance to colonisation was dead. However, after Tua's death, King Tawhiao brought the religion to his people. For decades, the kingitanga would remain strong, while the practice of Pai Marire faded. When World War I arrived, the kingitanga refused to take part in the grand designs of the empire. As a result, they faced great persecution. It was a dark time for the kingitanga, but in the midst of this darkness, Princess Te Puia found inspiration in an old taonga.
Ka tahuri ia te pātei mawai e whakahaere I tō tātou karakia. Ka teika tū mai te tehi kau mātua I roti te whare, e pai ana e kui. Au ka ko ngaro atu e rā atu. E me mai tō tūpana, I te toi maha koutou, tiki nātu te tāonga nei I te take o te maunga. Ko te rā tāonga, ko te Pai Marire. Ka teika whakaara I te Pai Marire. I roto I te rā wā, hei hāpai I tō rātou wairua e takahi e te krauna. Mai tērā wā heke mai ki tūranga wāwai te waka neke mai mga tāwhiri ki tūranga wāwai. Ko whakaora anō te Pai Marire I tērā kuia. I runga I te marae. Koe rā ana kupu, ka mahi, ka inoi, ka moe, ka mahi anō.
Today, Te Ua and his teachings of goodness and peace have been adopted by Māori spiritual believers. The prophet known as the Wind Man began a tradition of biblical prophecy that has profoundly inspired the Māori religious leaders who followed him.
Ko te Pai Marire I ora ai I Wainganui a mātou e te puake I runga I tō mātou nei whare karakia o runga I te marae tūranga wā. Ko te Pai Marire. Whitu karaka I tāta, whitu karaka I te pō. Ka hui hui ai. Koe rea te wā hei whakakotahi I a mātou. Taha wairua mai, taha tinana mai.
Directly and indirectly, Te Ua had created a line of prophets. These prophets faced the same challenges and had broadly the same prophetic goals as Te Ua: liberation from oppression and uplifting the people. But where Te Ua was in some ways a victim of his circumstances, the next prophet, Te Kōtia Rikirangi, would create his own destiny, with very different results. On the next episode of The Prophets, though persecuted and exiled, Te Kōtia Rikirangi was a man of destiny and would return to his people with vengeance, creativity, and a new vision of liberation.
When our culture was threatened, the loss of our land, people turned to charismatic leaders to show them a way through, and we were very, very lucky to have those people lead us through.
He mea tautoko na te māngai.